With Vohra method tutoring, we can help you dominate any academic class, whether it's an English class or a math class, chemistry, calculus, you name it, we can certainly help you. And if you're looking for that classic type of tutoring where you meet with a tutor, a few times a week, go over the material for that week, prepare for the quizzes or tests or whatever, we can totally help you with that. Not a problem at all. We can definitely 100% help you with that. But in this video, I want to talk about an approach that we have used to help students really dominate tests. And this is something that's actually also offered in our group classes. The thing where you meet with a tutor to go over your homework assignments and prepare for a quiz, that's something we only do in tutoring. But what I'm going to talk about in this video, we actually also do in group classes. So it's cheaper and it's actually usually much more effective. This is what has helped our students become valedictorians, Ivy League admits, all that kind of stuff. So here's how it works. Here's where I want to start with this. One of the things that we're trying to avoid is the situation where a student just hops from one topic to another, like this frog pictured here, basically forgetting everything as he goes. So he learns, topic number one, memorizes it, suffers through the test, forgets it, and does that with the next topic. Memorize it, short-term learns it, suffers through that test, and then forgets it. And this goes on, and it doesn't work in the long term, and clearly it's not going to get you ready for an exam. It's not an efficient way to learn. You're not actually learning anything. You're just going through the motions of learning. It's not very effective. And it's the number one thing that gets in the way of student success. Students who could be straight A students become B, C, or D students because they're just going from one topic to the other rather than actually building a fundamental understanding. So what we do in Vohra method group classes for homework assignments, it's very, very different from that. We work to build a permanent, long-term understanding. And this happens in basically three phases. Let's go ahead and switch over to Slack so we can get a sense of what happens with this. It basically comes up, it's built in three phases. In the first phase, we're going to address any underlying gaps. Simple example. Let's say you're taking algebra and there's a few gaps in arithmetic. We're going to fix those up. If you're doing algebra, but you can't add fractions, you're probably not going to really learn how to do algebra properly. So we're going to address those underlying gaps. Similarly, if you're doing calculus and there's a bunch of algebra gaps, we want to fix those first. Those are more important for the subject matter, and they're certainly going to be more important to actually do well in the test. When you look at mistakes that people make in calculus, they're usually algebra errors. They're not calculus errors. So that's the first thing. The second part is where things start to get really interesting, where we build the core understanding of that subject. And we do so many things there that are very, very critical. We'll start with algebra. In algebra, some of the core skills you need to know are things like combining like terms, factoring, etc. In our group classes, the way we're going to do that is we're going to see what you don't already know and focus on those parts of, say, algebra. We're going to have you work on the material that's the most fundamental to the course. We're not going to cover every single algebra worksheet we have because we have a few thousand. Instead, we're going to focus on the most important skills and make sure they're mastered. Things like factoring, combining like terms, multiplying monomials, all of that's going to be there. And we're going to do a few things to make 100% sure that you're actually learning it permanently. I'm going to show you a few of those over here. Let's say, I'm just going to go ahead and pick this problem. Let's say a student's doing this problem and they they struggle with it, they eventually figure it out. We're not going to just put that to the side. We're actually going to turn that into a review question. And what will happen is every single time that the student comes to class, we're going to start off with the review questions. We're going to make sure that this skill becomes permanent. Skill in algebra or geometry, chemistry, physics, calculus, you name it, is built on permanent and thorough understanding of core topics, not how many random formulas can you memorize. So we're going to review it at the beginning of every class until some teacher believes that you seem to have gotten it. Then what will happen is this. Let's go ahead and remove this. You'll see what happens. In our class, it's going to automatically become a future pop quiz question, and in 10% of your classes, this question will come up as a review. So we're making sure that it becomes a long-term skill. Now, we use a few other fancy tools. Often, I'll show you a calculus example. Give me 1 second here. Often, one of the biggest issues that we see in any kind of a subject is that people will literally forget the very fundamental basics. So we'll have various ways to remind students of them, to really get those core ideas to just stick in your mind. And it'll happen, of course, through review questions and whatnot. But we have a few other tricks up our sleeve. Here you see this sort of jarring looking font on this postcard. This font is a specially designed font. It's called Sanskrit Forgetica. It was developed by a research team in a university in Australia. The idea of this font is it's specifically designed to sort of almost force your brain to remember the information that you see. And so by doing things like this, we really help the key ideas stick in the student's mind. And so we're building those core skills, that core understanding, and that is the next thing that we do after we have addressed the underlying gaps. Now, once a student has gone through all this diagnostic process, they've fixed the underlying gaps, they've developed the core skills for the subject. At that point, and only at that point, does a student have any say at all in what they do. Before that, they can say that they want to work on algebra, but we're going to diagnose and analyze what's actually happening with that student, see what that student actually needs to be doing. Why do we do that? I'll tell you exactly why. Because we don't want this. If we let students just pick their subjects every time, what do you see with roughly 100% of students? They just jump from one topic to another. Why? Because that's what they do at school. That's what they've learned to do. It's not because students are trying to not learn. It's because they've been taught this very toxic and backwards approach from their schools where you learn a topic, jump to the next one, forget it, and never really learn anything. So we're trying to avoid this. So at first, a student can say, I want to work on algebra, but they can't say like what topic inside of algebra. However, once they've mastered this core set of principles, then we'll let the student pick whatever general topic they want to in algebra. Let's say a student says, I want to work on substitution. Totally fine. We can do that after they've shown mastery of all these various skills. Student says, I want to work on graphing quadratic equations. Totally fine. We can do that. However, even then, we're not going to be working on specific questions from school. There are two reasons for that. The big one is we don't want you to ever need to work on questions from school because we want you to be so far ahead of your school that those questions are an easy joke to you. We don't want you to just be kind of catching up with school. We want you to be months and months ahead. We want your school homework to be the easiest part of your math training. And so we're going to give you every encouragement we can to get you ahead. It shouldn't even make any sense to work on school homework. If we're doing this right, your school homework will be the easiest part of your day. That's going to be one reason. The other reason is we want to make sure we're maximizing efficiency during class. A lot of times the school homework just simply doesn't do that. If you want to work on a specific school problem, however, you can always do that in tutoring. And here's a really nice thing about our tutoring program. We don't have any minimums. So if you want to meet with me for a 15-minute session, by all means, do a 15-minute session. If the next day you want to do a 5-hour session, that might be hard to squeeze in, but if we can squeeze it in, scheduling-wise, well, we're totally happy to do that. We really give you the flexibility to do whatever you need to do to really dominate your school classes. But the key of the success is, what really makes this program work is that we don't allow this. We don't allow you to hop from one thing to the other and forget everything along the way. We make sure that we use every tool at our disposal to ensure that you are 100% mastering the important topics and really learning the subject.